I hope you are ready for an absolute gush fest. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris and today's video is the Azheek, The Rising by Naomi King's book review. I love this book. Fair warning, this is going to be a gush review. Even the elements that would normally annoy me in a book worked for me somehow in this book, and I just had such a good time. Azheek the Rising is an action-packed celebration of life, love, and culture wrapped up in elemental magic and legendary gods, and it was such a good time. The story of Azheek the Rising can basically be split perfectly down the middle with two parts of the same overall story. For the first half of the book, we're following Chester, Avon, and Varion as they run down Barad-dûr. Now the Barad-dûr are masked humans, that is the translation, and they seek to kill and capture Azheeks in order to steal their power. Eventually they make their way to Sontar Ivel. This is the heart of Einar and where we spend a majority of our time in this book. While they're there, our champions take place in a world-renowned tournament in hopes to find some of the answers to why Azheeks are disappearing during this tournament each and every year. This section of the book allows the reader an authentic look at the group dynamic between the main players as they play off one another and bond in friendship as they gradually become familiar and people that we can really follow and root for. And this was done very cleverly, in my opinion, because we saw the way that friendships can sometimes play off each other, and even initial distrust of between characters turn into something more and something very real and human and lovely. The second half of this book really deepens the world through culture and also the plot. It lets the reader know that there is so much more at stake than what we initially thought during the tournament phase of the book. We learn that the Barad-dûr have been stealing these Azheeks in order to obtain their power and try and harness it for themselves to create power, and the gods are not at all happy about it. Chester and her newfound family find themselves caught in the middle of political corruption and are in danger of becoming victims themselves. Basically, they're going to have to team up with some powerful people and other Azheeks and magic users in order to protect the ones that they have come to love. Here's where the gush comes in. I love so many things about this book, and the things that I love aren't necessarily the things that I would normally pick out and love in a book. My favorite thing by far is the social commentary that is being made throughout these pages, and I'll get to that in a minute. My second favorite part of this book, other than the social commentary, has to be the characters. Each of our main characters challenge the societal norm in some way, and it is beautiful. This book is an absolute celebration of humanity in all forms. And even those characters who only played a small role still differed from the Western ideals, I guess, in some way. And it really just was lovely. It was lovely to see so much representation in a book of about 500 pages. A couple of my favorites were Arven. He is a warsword. He is a creature that can turn at that whim and rip someone limb from limb. But he was also just a gentle soul who loved collecting flowers and learning about flowers, and also wearing obscenely bright colours and silks, and was just a sweetheart when he wasn't a beast eating people. We also had a character called Zaira. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She is the muscular woman of colour wielding a blacksmith hammer, creating the best armor the world has ever seen and the best armor that money could buy. And then another one that will always hold a little place in my heart was Nubaru. He is a carefree, sexually open Adonis who actually just treats people with respect and was a pleasure anytime that he was on the page, figuratively and literally. Like I said, these characters to me were such a celebration of the people that we have around us in the real world, no matter of skin color, no matter of body size, no matter of sexual or gender identity. It was just so freeing to read that in a book. So that being said, let's talk about some of the social commentary that Azheek the Rising brings to the table. Fantasy and sci-fi as genres allow themselves to be extremely adaptable to big world issues that can be explored in a fantastical manner. What Azheek the Rising does, in my opinion, is bring some of these smaller issues that aren't necessarily talked about all that much in these genres to the forefront of our minds. The one that shone out to me the most, and the one that had the biggest impact on me, is how society, or we as a Western society, let's say, view youth and beauty, and what that means to someone, and how much worth is tied into how beautiful somebody is, rather than what's actually inside of their hearts and their minds, purely on face value and how we view that. So people who, or Azheeks, were often referred to as in their prime when they were quite young and in their power, and people outside of this young age range were outside of their prime. They were a couple of years outside of their prime. This is something we hear all the time. Oh, I'm not in my prime anymore because I'm now 35. You can be whatever age and still be in your prime. There is no age limit to this, but that is something that was quite heavily focused on here. And it was also tied to relationships. So those people who had not found their Illis, or their one true connection, this could be platonic, this could be romantic, it could be sexual, it doesn't matter. If you had not found your Illis, or your one person that you would bond to, you would remain in your prime until you did so, and you would only start to age once you had a significant other of some description in your life. And that, to me, was just that commentary on we have to remain young and we have to remain beautiful. Doesn't matter what our age is, but we must achieve those things until we have a partner, and then we can let ourselves be whatever the hell we want to be. But our value is placed in having somebody else, which to me is silly, but it is still something that is so relevant to our society, particularly, Western societies, and it will be for the foreseeable future. I don't ever see that changing, but it was very interesting to have that commentary in a fantasy book. Now, in terms of the epic fantasy and dark fantasy story elements, they were absolutely here too. The standouts for me were the magic and the battle scenes. They were so epic. The Azheeks are the magic wielders of this world, and their magic is tied in the elements. So we have air, water, fire, and earth Azheeks. They all manipulate these powers, and King is not afraid to let those powers show, particularly in the battles, which I'll get to in a minute. But it was very interesting to see how these magic worked in both subtle ways and ways that had a bigger impact. It was also very creatively used. I think that we see elemental magic used quite a lot, but there were ways that King has described it where I had to sit back and thought, damn, would not have thought of that to use that power for, so that was cool. And just having some unique elements in a magic system that is used quite frequently in the fantasy genre was interesting to read. Speaking of not being afraid to use magic, the battle scenes in this book were epic, and horror elements were also skillfully brought into the battle scenes to really raise those stakes and heart rates as you were reading along, and you never had to wait too long to get some sort of action scene to really make this book come off the page. And on that note, the pacing of Azheek the Rising was very, very good. It did slow down where it had to. It let us get a little bit of slice of life for the characters and start relating to them, but you never had to wait too long to get a fast-paced action scene. Now, something I do not praise very often, and I don't think I've ever praised on this channel, is the sex scenes. There were a few in this book which I was like, I need a minute. They were actually good. And having a good sex scene in a fantasy, I don't know, I haven't come across it all that often, but they were that good that it's worth mentioning that Naomi King can write a decent, spicy section. God, I'm awkward. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book. There are a few criticisms that I have, one being that there was an overuse of the word gargantuan. It was used a lot to describe something that is big, and there could have been another word a few times that could have been used, so that repetition of that word did get under my skin a little bit, as well as some repetition in the battle scenes. Because there were so many, people would often perish in the same way, and it would be the same sentence that was used in the battle scene. So one battle scene would have someone die a certain way, that exact sentence would be used in another battle scene down the track, and it was enough that I was noticing it by the time the end of the book rolled around. But honestly, I didn't care as much because of how much I enjoyed it, because I really enjoyed this book overall. I had a great time with it. That's it from me. Enough gushing. If you like the content, give it one of these. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will, and I will catch you in the next video. Ciao.